Please welcome former CEO of Apple and PepsiCo, John Sculley, and interviewer Marc Hodosh, co-host and founder Life Itself, to discuss disrupting healthcare through technology and innovation.
Hi, I'm Marc Hodosh from the Life Itself, and I'm really thrilled and excited to be here today with the one and only John Sculley. John is the former CEO of PepsiCo and also the former CEO of Apple, and has so much to tell us today about the world of healthcare, particularly from the perspective of technology and design. So John, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Marc.
John, I wanted to ask you, you had the privilege of being able to work with certainly the most well-known, I would say, technology developer, Steve Jobs, and or marketer, however you kind of look at Steve, and you learned so much from him. I'm wondering what you learned from Steve in regards to computers in the early days that would apply to healthcare. What lessons do you think that you kind of learned from him that we should be thinking about?
Well, I did work with Steve Jobs and Bill Gates back at the early days of the information economy. And it's exciting to be able to be working in the early days of the digital health economy. So what I learned from Steve was that you have to have a set of first principles. You want to have a purpose-driven organization, and you want to have a really big idea in terms of how you can not only change the world, but how you can motivate really talented people to want to come and do it with you. Because Steve knew that the greatest skill he had was not building products. He was not an engineer, but he was able to recruit just extraordinarily talented individuals who worked together as a team. And it was Steve's ability to recruit them and to motivate them that I think set such high standards for Apple that we all enjoy today.
He was focused on design and the user experience. And I would argue that even at PepsiCo, you came from a world where it was largely about emotion. Drink this and you'll feel great. Could healthcare use a little bit of that to change the way people's behaviors are, change this behavior and you'll feel great? Because it's so hard to change behaviors, but companies like Pepsi and Apple do that.
Well, you're absolutely right. Behavior change is what the next era of healthcare is going to be all about. You can only do that if you start with the consumer, the patient, the person who is going to be most impacted if they do change their behavior. And up until now, the healthcare industry has largely been a sick care industry. 85% of the spend in healthcare in the United States is for people who are chronically ill. So if we can begin to pivot towards preventative care, if we can begin to get people to focus on what can they do for better proactive health, which is all about taking responsibility for their own behavior.
I'm wondering, I think you're involved in a company that works with AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning. How do you see that role or that technology really impacting healthcare? What areas do you think it's going to be most applicable?
Well, I'm actually involved with several companies that are using machine learning and AI because they're becoming such foundational technologies for basically everything that is transformative in the world today. But let me give you a couple of examples. A company in the UK, which is called Zedson, we are using 3D medical grade sensors to be able to do things non-invasively that you couldn't imagine was possible even a few years ago. For example, we can look through the epidermis, the skin, and we can non-invasively not only measure accurately one's blood glucose levels, particularly important for diabetics, but we can also look at other blood constituents like electrolytes, like hemoglobin, being able to identify many things about the life source of who we are as human beings, which is our blood, and being able to give people signals that we can then analyze with artificial intelligence and interpret them longitudinally over time. And this opens up a whole new horizon for being able to give people better information for their own better behavior changes that they can make.
How about in drug development? Do you see AI playing a big role in developing drugs, and particularly from a personalized perspective? Are you involved in anything in that regard? Is that?
Well, I am involved in life science with a company called Cellularity, where we are doing placenta blood cord stem cells. This has nothing to do with designer babies. This is purely about taking placenta stem cells and being able to do things like developing cancer cures, or being able to look at functional changes with regenerative medicine. So that, for example, we're actually able to start to look at developing things that can extend people's life, higher quality of life, all with the ability to use stem cells. But the high-tech technology, I think, to go back to your question about artificial intelligence, one of the big areas that I'm involved with is called healthcare automation. And by that, I mean that if you look at the roughly $4 trillion we spend in the US on health spend every year, about a quarter of that, almost $1 trillion, is in things that are avoidable, misuse, all kinds of inefficiencies in the healthcare system that you can bring in what is called robotic process automation, meaning little smart robots, all software embedded with algorithms for machine learning or artificial intelligence, that are able to go in and at dramatically lower costs and far greater accuracy are able to take on all kinds of tasks, particularly tasks that are dealing with the complexity of rules and regulations in healthcare, and be able to do that far more accurately than humans could do it. So machine learning and artificial intelligence can have huge impact, not only in the processes and systems and delivery of healthcare, but it can also have big impact in terms of giving consumers better information to be able to manage their own proactive wellness.
Is Apple a future major healthcare company?
Well, Tim Cook said that he believes that one of the great legacies of Apple, if you look back decades from now, will be its contribution to health. And I think there's good reason for that to make sense, because Apple's been very clear. It does not want to be in the business of actually taking the place of the doctor or taking the place of the hospital system. What they want to do is to be able to use their understanding of technology, like an Apple Watch or any other wearable for that matter, where you can actually measure with sensors different attributes. It could be sleep, it could be blood glucose, it could be measuring your heart rates or your heart health. All of these things are going to get better and better with technology. What Apple has said they want to do is they want to be able to take these wearable devices with smart sensors and be able to deliver that. They now have about 150 million first-tier profile organizations, and they provide them with that data and then let them do the actual care of patients. Apple doesn't want to be doing that part of the process themselves.
John, last question. I'm wondering what got you into healthcare, from coming from Pepsi and Apple. What took you into the field of healthcare? Where does your interest lie to be so involved and invested in this field?
Mark, I can remember about 15 years ago, one of my great friends, Bob Metcalfe, who invented Ethernet, which we know is the foundational technology for the internet, said, John, people like you and me, as we get older, we need to reinvent ourselves. And I thought back to the early days that I was working with Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and how they used to talk about how they were going to change the world. Bill was going to do it with software. Steve was going to do it with beautiful design and user experience. And both of them said that they were going to make it a noble cause. They were going to do something that would have longevity, well beyond their own time. And that stuck with me through the decades. And so when Bob Metcalfe said, why don't you reinvent yourself? I said, I'm going to pick something that I think can be interpreted as a noble cause. And so I picked healthcare, and I've been at it for the last 15 years. And I'm just thrilled that I chose that path to go.
Well, I remember when you and Bob Metcalfe and others, I think were judges at the first robotics competition that I helped lead years ago. And you're all an inspiration to the future generations to help start these great companies and technologies. And so I thank you for that. I thank you for being here with us today. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Mark.